Welcome back. We will now take a look at manual operations. What I'm talking about here is manual scaling operations. So you can execute a scaling rule by hand that will add or remove ECS instances. You can execute a scaling rule given the following conditions. If the scaling group is active and no other scaling activity is executing, then your scaling rule will be executed directly without waiting for the cooldown. If the number of ECS instances to be added by your scaling rule plus the number of instances already in the group exceeds the max value, then your total new instances to be added will be adjusted down so that you no longer exceed the max value. The same is true for the min size. If the number of instances you're going to remove will take the group below the min size value, then the number of instances actually removed will be adjusted down or up when your scaling rule is triggered. If a scaling group is active and no scaling activity is being executed for the scaling group, adding an ECS instance will execute directly without waiting for the cooldown. If the number of ECS instances to be added by the scaling rule again exceeds the max size, the operation will fail. So the actual add operation will fail. Manually added ECS instances are not associated with your scaling configuration in the scaling group, so they don't count here. Removing an ECS instance, removal depends on the reclaim mode you chose. Instances will either be stopped if you chose shutdown and reclaim mode, or they'll be released if you chose release mode. When a manually added ECS instance is removed from a scaling group, the instance is not stopped or released. If a scaling group is active and no scaling activity is being executed for the group, your ECS instance removal will occur immediately without waiting for the cooldown. If the number of existing ECS instances in the scaling group minus the number of ECS instances to be removed is less than the min size value, then of course the operation will fail. Similar to what happens when you try to add an instance and it will take the group above the maximum size. Let's try executing some add and remove rules in our scaling group and see what happens. Once again, we're back in the console. Let's try executing our scale up to rule, which should add an additional 2 instances to our group. Our group currently contains 2 instances. We should be able to add 2 more with no problem because that will bring us to a total of 4. The maximum size of the group is, of course, 5. So let's execute that scale up rule. Click OK. And let's see what happens after we execute. So the rule has now executed. Let's go take a look at our scaling group. We'll go to the basic information page. And in a moment, we should be able to see that there's a total of 4 here. 2 are in service already, meaning they're ready to serve requests, and 2 more are being added. So in fact, the rule did take the group up to the new size, which is 4 total instances. Let's wait a minute for those instances to become active. Sure enough, we see that the activity executed successfully. You can see the last scaling activity was add 2 instances. It was successful, and we now have 4 instances in our group. Let's try to execute that scaling activity or that scaling rule again. So I'll go back to scaling rules and we'll try again. This time, if I really added 2 instances, I would grow my group to a total of 6. 4 plus 2, 6 instances. Of course, that's bigger than the maximum size limit of 5 that I set on my scaling group. So this should succeed, but it should only be able to add 1 instance. So let's click on execute and OK. And then once the rule has executed, we'll go back to the basic info page and we'll see what's happening. You can see that the scaling activity actually is add 1 instance. It was adjusted down to 1 from the 2 that the rule specified because the maximum number of instances we can add here is 5. That's the maximum upper limit on our group. Let's wait for that to execute. And sure enough, after waiting for a while, the group size has grown to 5 instances in service and our scaling activity has succeeded. Let's now go in the opposite direction and try scaling the group down. So I'll go back to scaling rules, and now we'll try executing our scale down to activity. So I'll click execute, and then I'll click OK. And just for fun, let's try to re-execute that again right now during the cooldown period. Let's see what happens. It says, the scaling group to which the specified scaling rule belongs has scaling activities in progress. So there's already a scaling activity happening. This rule can't be triggered right now. So let's go cancel that and go back to basic info. And let's see, we should now be removing 2 instances. And in fact, we're already done. We've already removed 2 of the 5, bringing our total down to 3. Let's execute the rule one more time. So I'll go back, scale down 2, and click execute. This time we should be OK. And sure enough, we can execute the rule again. When we go back to the basic settings page, we're removing 1. So why is that? Well, there were 3 in the group before, and we tried to remove 2, which would have taken the total down to 1. The minimum size of the group is 2, so we can't remove 2. We can only remove 1 from the 3, taking the total size of the group down to 2. And you can see that that has now succeeded, and the group is back where we started at 2 instances. That's all for this portion of the course. When we come back in our next section, we'll take a look at how we can trigger a scaling rule based on an event, such as a change in CPU or memory usage.